What's going on, Packers Nation? Welcome back to another video of Packers Latest. I am your host, Taylor Bretl, keeping you up to date on the latest news on the green and gold Green Bay Packers. A happy Wednesday to all of you watching out there, and a huge shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. Even though the Super Bowl has officially concluded and there will not be football for the next couple of months, you can still get in on all the action on Underdog. Basketball season is picking up. Baseball season's right around the corner. You don't want to miss out on any of that. So if you want to sign up, feel free to scan that QR code right up there. When you play your first $5, you can win $75 in bonus entries. On today's show, we got lots to talk about. Do want to talk about the Super Bowl to start this one off and kind of look at what I saw in that Super Bowl, what I saw from the Seattle Seahawks that made them so dominant in the 29-13 win, and then transition that into what could the Packers, who could they look at to draft? What type of position? What are their needs that they could kind of fill their needed voids and look a little bit more like Seattle and hopefully come away with the Lombardi next season? And maybe outside of the draft, it's a player that could get extended, that could stay in the team for a little bit. We're going to look into Tucker Kraft and see the deal going on there. And then we're going to close it off with ESPN's way too early 2026 power rankings. So starting this one off with Super Bowl talk. If you didn't watch, I assumed you watched, but if you didn't watch, the Seattle Seahawks defeated the New England Patriots 29-13 in a game that was rather dominant. I mean, it felt like Seattle won that game by 40 points, even though they won just 29-13. At one point, they were up as much as 19-0 before the Patriots tried to crawl back in the late minutes, but were unsuccessful. Big three things I saw in this Super Bowl. Number one on my list, defense wins championships. I mean, Seattle had, 7 or 8 total sacks in that game. I think 3 guys had 2 each. There was also a strip sack, fumble return for a touchdown, so you got a defensive score in there as well. Defense wins championships. Sounds obvious. It's something that a lot of people say, but man, that is why Seattle won that game. Their offense wasn't the prettiest. They were able to drive the field a little bit, but lots of field goals totaling those 29 points. So Seattle's defense, very unreal. I mean, that defensive line, one of the best performances from a defense in Super Bowl history. I mean, I'd have to go game by game to really see where this one would sit, but it was overall dominance. It was arguably Drake May's worst game of the season, the full regular season and all the playoffs. His worst of the season was arguably the most important in Super Bowl 60 because that Seattle defense was so dominant. The next line that I have is O-line wins championships. That Seattle offensive line was very strong for Darnold, and you can look at it on the other side, where for New England, that O-line was not strong for Drake May. Don't get me wrong, Drake May didn't really, throw the ball away when maybe he had chances to. He sat in the pocket pretty long, but that O-line was collapsing a lot. I mean, I do forget the number off the top of my head. I think Seattle had 7 sacks as a team in that game. I mean, that is absolutely unreal. And I believe Drake May got sacked the most times a quarterback has in a total postseason, surpassing Joe Burrow the year that the Bengals made the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So, yeah, shows the importance of O-line, which is a position that could be rather weak for Green Bay this year. Will Elton Jenkins be hanging around? Who knows about that? That's still a name that the Packers have to look at. And, there's going to be a lot of gaps. Rasheed Walker likely going to be gone on that offensive line as well. So, there's going to be a lot of gaps. And the third point that I have as a takeaway for the Super Bowl, kickers are important. We saw that in the big reason why the Packers lost to the Chicago Bears in the wild card round, because Brandon McManus left 7 points on the board. You go to Seattle and you look at their kicker, Myers. I mean, that dude was automatic. I think the furthest field goal he had to kick was only 41 yards, but he was making them all. At one point, I don't know if you were watching and thought the same thing, I thought he was going to be the first kicker to win Super Bowl MVP. I mean, he was automatic on extra points, and he didn't miss a single field goal. That is something that the Packers are hungry for on a playoff team. Brandon McManus now, I shouldn't say improves, now moves to 1-4 on field goals in the postseason with the Green Bay Packers, and, left 7 points on the board in the loss to the Bears, a big reason why they lost that game outside of, the many, many collapses that happened in the fourth quarter. So we're going to transition this into kind of talking about what is Green Bay's top need. I mean, we've talked about the kickers, we talked about O-line, we talked about defensive line, but I think there's still a top need that is sitting there for Green Bay that, in my opinion, is the one that they need to attack the most, and that's the cornerback room. This is a cornerback room that struggled a lot this season. That was very, very thin. Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine leading the group, and, not the best season for the corner room. Packers definitely face some tough opponents, but you can't leave any excuses on the board. I think a big thing about the corner room, a couple videos ago, we talked about free agents. Who could the Packers be looking at picking up there? I believe that they should pick up a cornerback or two in free agency. But another big thing about this, Green Bay just does not draft corners. I mean, this just hasn't been a thing that they've done. And, it feels like corners in need every single year. And, it's another position that they pass up on and they wait till the 7th round. I'm going to go year by year up until 2021. Which is the last time the Packers drafted a corner not in the 7th round, which was Eric Stokes in that first round in 2021. You go to 2025, this past draft, they drafted Micah Robinson in the 7th round. You go to the year before, 2024, they drafted Kalen King in the 7th round. Then you go to 2023, they drafted Carrington Valentine, who, is one of the starting corners, but he was also in the 7th round. 2022, there wasn't even a cornerback drafted in that year. And then you get to 2021 when it is Eric Stokes. So again, the Packers, it's not like they're trying to reach for corners and they're just not hitting. They're not even trying to reach for corners. And don't get me wrong, Carrington Valentine, 2023, even though he's a 7th-round pick, he's one of the starting corners on the Green Bay Packers. No disrespect to him, but if you draft a 7th-round corner and he's starting for you, that, first of all, is a very impressive turnaround from probably where expectations were. But second of all, kind of highlights that the cornerback room is rather thin. Valentine, you got to give credit for, almost not even being drafted to now being a starting corner on a playoff-level team in the Green Bay Packers. You got to give him credit, but it's just not the overall recipe for success. So we talked about the names the Packers could get in free agency. I think that there's some names that they can get in the draft. They don't have a first-round pick. Their first pick is pick number 52, which falls in the 2nd round. Could Green Bay get a corner there? I would be rather pleased if they try to do so. But I know corner is a position where you could, get a name early and he doesn't pan out. I mean, Eric Stokes is kind of an example of that, and maybe it's why Green Bay has turned away from drafting a corner since. Eric Stokes actually had a great year on the Raiders this season, but with the Packers, he had a very good rookie year. It felt like it was worth the pick. And after that, he had his, many struggles, lots of penalty issues, and it was a player that just didn't work out. So maybe this is why Green Bay's shying away from it. You'd rather get a trusted name in free agency that you've already seen in the NFL for a couple of years. But in my opinion, they have to get one in some form. I mean, I think the most recent corner I can think of that I really wanted the Packers to get was Christian Gonzalez, but the Packers drafted Lucas Van Ness and let Gonzalez go to the Patriots, which was the same draft where JSN went to the Seahawks a couple picks later. 2 big misses there, 2 guys that got to see it on the biggest stage of the Super Bowl, while the Packers stuck with Lucas Van Ness, who I'm hoping has a big bounce back year because he's been rather quiet since being drafted. But before we get into the next point, have to give a huge shout out to Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring this video. Fast breaks, buzzer beaters, and block parties are back, and Underdog is the best place to get in on all the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right, and you can win up to 5,000 times your cash. This week on Underdog, I'm looking at this game today, the Milwaukee Bucks and the Orlando Magic, who actually just played, but now you got to switch locations of where you're playing. But I got this Bucks and Magic game, and I'm going to look at Ryan Rollins, the point guard for the Milwaukee Bucks, and I have higher than 17.5 points. In their last matchup, Orlando took down Milwaukee 118-99, and despite Milwaukee struggling as a team, Ryan Rollins still finished with 14 points. I believe that this matchup will be a little bit closer, and I believe that Ryan Rollins will be the reason for that. So I have higher than 17.5 points, and feel free to leave in the comments down below. Do we have basketball fans in here? I know you're here to hear about the Green Bay Packers, but I'm curious, with the Green Bay Packers being in Wisconsin, do you follow the ties to the Milwaukee Bucks in Wisconsin as well? Do you have a different team you pull for? Do you not really care? I want to hear it from you because I'd be interested to see who you're pulling for to possibly win an NBA championship. So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and use promo code FOOTBALLFAN to score $75 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. That's promo code FOOTBALLFAN. Underdog. Make picks, win money.
Must be 18 plus. 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska. 19 plus in Colorado for some games. 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia. And present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. See assets.underdogfantasy.com/play and get terms DFSTML for details. Offer not valid in Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8 or text HOMI 467-369.
I welcome you back to Packers Latest. Now we're talking about Tucker Kraft and could he possibly be seeing an extension in the near future. I think that this is a name that the Packers must lock down, but coming off, an ACL injury, it makes this situation definitely interesting to look at. But we see a guy in Christian Watson who I wanted to bring up before we get into Kraft. he had his 1 year left on his rookie deal. And before the season really started this season, the Packers extended him to 1 more year. So Watson will be back for the 2026 season because he got that 1 year extension. Could the Packers do something similar with Tucker Kraft as he now enters a contract year? Well, let's take a look into it. Tucker Kraft this season, one of the best, if not the best tight ends in the stretch of when he was healthy. He had 32 receptions for 489 yards and 6 touchdowns. In his last full game played, it was that dominating game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. On prime time, Tucker Kraft had 7 receptions for 143 yards and 2 touchdowns. Unfortunately, the game that followed that, the one against Carolina at home where the Packers, first of all, they lost 16-13 in an ugly game. And second of all, was the game where Tucker Kraft went down with the ACL injury and was announced he'd be out for the year. So a question with that, I know it's weird to ask, but with the injury, with Tucker Kraft, having to really bounce back after a healthy, very good stretch and now obtaining an ACL injury, could that make his price cheaper? We see this with some guys, even Christian Watson. This is why the Packers extended him to that 1 extra year. Watson coming off that, ACL injury himself in that Week 18 loss to the Bears in 2024. The Packers extended him to another year before he even played a snap back from that injury in 2025. Could the Packers be doing something similar with Tucker Kraft, and could that make him a little bit cheaper? I'm not sure. In my opinion, I'd like to extend Tucker Kraft more than just 1 year, and with that, being more than just 1 year, maybe they still could get it cheaper than if he was fully healthy and maybe had a top 3 tight end season last season if he played it all the way through. But I'm just kind of curious how you guys think that may work. I think that he could have a cheaper price tag, but it will be interesting to monitor nonetheless. So again, Tucker Kraft, in my opinion, one of the best tight ends last season for what we saw, and a big loss outside of the receptions, with Kraft arguably being the wide receiver 1 on that team with the numbers he was putting up, was the blocking. You saw that. I talked about in the Super Bowl takeaways how O-line is important. Tucker Kraft almost, plays like an O-lineman. He was very impactful on the blocks, and all due respect to the depth of the tight end room, but when you saw the guys that followed behind Tucker Kraft that had to come in to block, you noticed it was just not as strong as when Kraft was in there. So, should the Packers extend him? I think they should. This is a guy that you cannot lose, but how will they extend it? Will it just be 1 extra year like Watson, or they try to keep him for the long run? That'll be something to monitor over the next couple of days and throughout the offseason. But getting into the last point of this video, I want to talk about how ESPN released their way too early power rankings for next season. This is definitely interesting to look at. Again, it's way too early power rankings. This is before teams make moves. This is before the draft happens. So this will definitely change once the NFL draft has happened and when we get closer to kickoff next season. But reading this 1 through 10, and I'll even sneak in the 11th team, it follows in this order. First is the Seattle Seahawks, followed by the Patriots, Rams, Broncos, Bills, 49ers, Lions, Eagles, Jags, then the Packers sit in 10th, and the Bears sit at 11th. I don't know how you guys weigh this. I mean, again, it's way too early predictions. It's before guys land on new teams, so kind of take it with a grain of salt, kind of a power ranking. That's how I view it. But I think my main takeaway, it's interesting. They got the Lions atop the NFC North, and they got the Packers above the Bears. A Bears team that was ever so close to reaching an NFC championship. They got them 3rd on power rankings among NFC North teams. And you look at the Packers as well. The NFC teams that sit above them are the Seahawks, which makes sense to me. Rams, which makes sense to me. 49ers makes sense to me. Lions is just a little interesting, but they will be playing with a 3rd place schedule, so I think that can help them out a lot. And the Eagles make sense to me, and the Packers following that kind of feels right to me. 10th overall in the NFL. What's that? Seahawks, Rams, 49ers, Lions, Eagles, Packers. Yep, got the Packers 6th team in the NFC. Based on the seeding in the playoffs, they were the 7th seed. So could they bump up to a 6? Who knows? I would obviously like the division back to be in the hands of Green Bay and, maybe be a little higher in the NFC to where you get a bye. But I know that's a lot to ask for, but it would be nice if the Packers can stay healthy because I feel like that they could be better than what ESPN is projecting. But the NFC is an absolute gauntlet. You just saw the vast difference with the Patriots taking on the Seahawks. There was just such a big gap in how dominant the NFC could be next season. But again, the interesting takeaway is how, in my opinion, they got the Lions above the Packers and the Bears, but the Lions are playing that 3rd place schedule, and the Bears will be playing a 1st place schedule, and the Packers a 2nd place schedule, so that obviously shakes things up in their own. But that's all I got for this episode of Packers Latest. I appreciate you all tuning in as always, and go Pack Go.